What's your darkest secret that you're hiding from everyone? Story 1. A man broke into my home about 10 years ago. He knocked, I answered the door, and he pushed his way in. He spoke about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and tried to extort me for protection, or he and his brothers of doom would come and kill me. He was huge, an ex-Navy if he was to be believed, drunk as hell, hand covered in blood, holding a broken bottle. I was terrified, so I told him to leave. But he wouldn't listen, and instead he was getting aggressive. I told him I would splatter his brains against the wall if he didn't. I didn't have a gun at the time. Anyway, he still refused to leave. I went into my kitchen and grabbed a knife and sliced at him a few times. He staggered away, seemingly okay. I assumed he was all right, just wounded a bit. Because of that, he ran away and I never saw him again. A neighbor told me days later a man was found dead with some wounds on his arms. I can only guess he bled out, but I never got questioned somehow. There was a lot of blood in and around my house. I lived in a pretty seedy area, and I guess the cops just didn't care. The guy was apparently a repeat criminal. I eliminated a man, at least indirectly, and I have never told anybody. Anyone might harm a man that illegally entered his home without authorization, with a bloody hand around a weapon. That was completely off his guard. I think everyone should be able to protect their private land regardless of the potential consequences. A burglar basically puts you in a hostage situation and you can be 100% within your right to defend yourself in that situation. Story 2. I was married for 13 years to my best friend, and we had what I thought was a great, easy marriage. One day, our 5-year-old daughter told me he was having her perform oral on him. I was shocked, devastated, and afraid. He was one of those fun guys everyone loves to be around. I immediately called the police and he was arrested. When they started investigating him, they found out that he had been arrested while in college for exposing himself to very young boys. He only got a slap on the wrist at that time because he came from a very wealthy family. One of his uncles was the governor of the state we lived in. I was so ashamed I told our friends that he had an affair and moved away. But the truth was that he was in prison for 5 years. I picked up the pieces, sent our daughter to therapy, and spent the next 15 years being a mother, paying for the private school, cool trips, etc. Then, when she went to college, he reached out to her over Facebook. When I saw she was communicating with him, I was shocked, devastated, and afraid all over again. I called and told her that she was an adult, but I thought she should be careful because he was not safe. She hung up on me and has not spoken to me since. That was 4 years ago. I sent her $40,000 a year still to pay for her medical school. It's all been almost unbelievable. Story 3. When I was young, probably around age 9 or 10, I was walking home with my dog from a house around the block when he cut the corner and walked diagonally through the yard of this super mean old lady who lives at the end of your street. She was in her yard at the time tending to these really fancy-looking rose bushes she had grown in beds along the border with her neighbor. My dog was a very friendly golden retriever who didn't even really come near her and certainly didn't do anything threatening, but she sprayed the out of him with some kind of insecticide or another chemical she was using for her roses. I ran back home with the dog and hosed him off. He coughed a bunch but seemed otherwise fine. I didn't tell my parents because somehow I thought I was going to get into trouble for letting the dog walk in her yard. I'm glad I didn't tell them though, because I decided that night to sneak downstairs, out the half-bath window, and down the street to her yard, where I cut down every goddamn rosebush I could get my hands on. Story 4. Last Christmas, I learned that my sister and I don't have the same father and are technically half-sisters. Her biological father tried to start a relationship with my mom that resulted in a pregnancy and ultimately didn't work out. That biological father is dead now, but I didn't probe any further about his identity or how he died in case it was something traumatic for my mom to remember. So she raised my sister as a single mother at my grandma's house in the 80s. Then she met my father, and they started dating, and it worked out because they got married in the 90s, moved into a new house, and a short time after, I was born. She told me never to call my sister my half-sister, and just pretended all this doesn't matter because she's my sister, and I'm keeping it that way. And if anyone asks about the 10-year age gap, I just tell them it's a long story. Story 5. When I was younger, I lived with my grandmother. Not long after I turned 18, her health started to decline. That sort of decline that you know means she won't be around for much longer. Over the months, I did my best to take care of her. getting her to the hospital when she needed it, and other things. She had someone coming every day to help her with things I couldn't. Well, what my family doesn't know is that the night she passed, I was in the living room watching TV. My dog was in bed with my grandma, and I started to hear him whimper and bark. I knew what was happening. I knew that if I acted, I could potentially save her. I didn't want to watch her suffer anymore, though. To watch her live with so much pain and be unable to do anything for herself anymore. So I made the choice to let her pass before making any calls. She lived 92 years, and the only regret I have is that she passed a month after I would have graduated if I hadn't been kicked out of school. She had been in good enough health at the time to go to my graduation. I still kick myself for how stupid I was back then. Edit. I didn't expect this much support. I'm not too torn up about letting her pass. I knew it was for the best. She was such a great person. She didn't deserve to live in such a poor manner any longer than she already had. I don't regret what I did. I regret what I had done to get me kicked out of school. That I didn't try and make it to graduation for her. I think I've lived my life so far in a way that she'd be proud of. Not graduating before she passed is the only regret I really have in this life so far, and I'm 35 now, so I think I'm doing pretty well. Story 6. It's not my secret, but my mom's, and I'm not hiding it from everyone, just the person to whom it potentially matters the most. When my mom was in high school in the 60s, she had a long-term serious boyfriend named Jimmy. They were each other's first. They were together for years and were planning on getting married. He went away to college and my mom stayed behind, but they were still together. You know what happened next. He cheated and got the new girl pregnant. He comes home to break the news to my mom. Abortion was not legal at the time, and he basically said that he wanted to be with my mom, but he had no choice but to marry this other girl. Naturally, my mom was devastated. Here's the secret. My mom was also pregnant with him, but hadn't told him yet. She decided she wasn't ever going to tell him. Jimmy went on to marry the other girl and never knew my mom was also pregnant. She told me that she later threw herself down a flight of stairs to cause a miscarriage. My mom actually reconnected with Jimmy during the early days of Facebook. She didn't have an account, but asked me to look for him using mine. He was still married to the same person. My mom was married to my dad. They wrote to each other for a while, using my account for some reason, and signed their messages saying, "I love you." My mom passed away a number of years ago. I think about this knowledge I have that Jimmy doesn't. This major life event thing that he doesn't even know happened. That could have changed the trajectory of many lives. I'm certainly not going to tell him, as it's not my secret to keep. Edit. There seems to be a part of the story that I didn't make clear enough. My mom had a miscarriage and never had that baby. It was an intentional miscarriage by throwing herself down the stairs. Jimmy is not my father. In my opinion, wisdom doesn't mean you don't have feelings for your former partner that you first were going to have a child with. Plus, a pair can be from a different generation that may not have even been taught to properly cope with their emotions. That can always happen. Adults have conflicting emotions too. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying if two people that are forced to be removed for so long want to express how they feel through messages, I don't see it as such a bad thing. There are a lot of unresolved issues and trauma there, especially for females. Getting to speak to their partner can be helpful for them. Story 7. It's heartbreaking hearing of so many people who were sexually assaulted as children and feeling like they have no option but to hide it, which causes irreparable rifts between friends, family, and other close ones. Just want to let all of you affected by this know that if you did go public, you're not the cause of any conflict. No matter how anybody else paints it, you were the victim of one of the most heinous things one human being can do to another. The source of conflict is all down to whoever perpetrated the violence against you, and the same should not be yours to live with. Story 8. I have struggled with disordered eating for at least a decade. I know it's unhealthy, but the toxic part of me loves the feeling of being empty. Several years ago, it was really bad since I was at my lowest weight ever, had brain fog, and had difficulty with my breathing. When I started eating again, my stomach would get really bloated, even if I only ate a small amount. I gained weight in the last year or so, and my depression and anxiety got really bad for a while. My family thinks I don't want to spend time with them. However, I just wanted to stay home because trying on my clothes and the idea of being in public made me want to take my own life. It was easier on me mentally to just stay home. I can feel myself slipping back into my old disordered eating habits, unfortunately. Eating disorders are not something to be taken lightly, and it's so important to get mental health help because it's a mind thing that then affects your body. Many people die from eating disorders or shorten their lifespan. I think that you should get professional help from an eating disorder team. Number 9. My wife, her mom, and I bought a house about 2 years ago. Just from talking to the neighbors, I'd gathered that the family who lived here before had a daughter that was mixed up with the wrong people. We had some random person knock at our door at night saying he needed gas. We were down a long driveway. No way you'd randomly walk up to our house to ask for help. I think he was looking for the people who used to live there. And then another time, Sunday morning, making pancakes for the family, I get a knock on the door and it's 4 sheriffs saying they received a 911 call that hung up and it was from this house. We don't have a landline, and I assured them my wife and 2-year-old did not make any calls. They mentioned the name of the previous occupants, and I let them know we moved in earlier this year. They seemed okay with that and left. Anyways, I was doing some yard work and struck up a conversation with the neighbor. He saw the police cars and asked what was up. I told him the situation, and he just goes, "Oh yeah, that family was messed up. The cops were probably being cautious considering the shooting." I asked him about that, and he replied there was a shooting in my house before. Then he proceeds to tell me that about 2 years before, the father in the house confronted his daughter and boyfriend, and he didn't like it and shot and killed him in the house. Our state doesn't have a disclosure law, so we never knew. I was blown away. All the strange happenings kinda made sense now. He said the friends of the victim had kinda terrorized them for a while because the police were taking so long to press charges. Slashed tires, midnight fireworks, odd shit that the neighbors hated. It was crazy. But hey, do me a favor and never tell my wife or mother-in-law about that. They are very spooked by things like that. So the TRDL is that we live in a house, and I'm the only one in my family that knows. Reply 1. This happened to us. Lived in the house for 10 years, and when we were getting ready to move out, we got to chatting with our neighbor who came to help move boxes. And he goes, "Yeah, well, after that preacher killed his wife in that back room, then hung himself in the garage, we never thought anyone would buy this house." Creepy thing is, my grandmother who died in that back bedroom 4 months earlier had complained for the last year of her life that she kept hearing a couple fighting and the screaming kept waking her up at night. We honestly thought her dementia was causing her to hear things or have nightmares. After she died, my mom lived in the house alone for a bit and said she could hear faint screaming coming from the back bedroom at night. Story 10. I found my adoption papers a few years ago when I was looking for a copy of my birth certificate. I know my birth mom, I just never had a relationship with her. My maternal grandmother took me in 2002 and I never knew she adopted me. I just knew that one day I ended up living with her, after telling her one day I don't want to go back home. Lol. I also found the letter that my mom wrote as to why she was giving me up. That one really hurt. Edit. My grandma is really the sweetest person ever. I'm forever grateful for her, but I just wanted to say now that I'm older, I understand why my mom did what she did. And believe it or not, we actually have a cordial relationship now. Edit 2. This brought back some unsettling feelings I thought I was over. They made me realize that I'm not the only one who had a rough life growing up, and I shouldn't let that stop me from healing and being the best that I can be. This has been one of the worst years of my life. I've been taking loss after loss, and I honestly felt like unaliving myself. I kept coming back to read the comments, and I see how strong everyone is and didn't let what they went through stop them from doing better. So I just wanted to say that I've made an appointment to start therapy again, and I'm going to be completely honest about how I truly feel and open up more. Also, I haven't been the best granddaughter lately, so I'm spending more quality time with my grandma and helping her out with whatever she needs. There's a whole lot that goes into raising kids, especially if you have hormone imbalances /postpartum /chronic sleep deprivation. Sometimes it's too much to handle if you don't have the right resources. These situations are truly disastrous, to be honest. Might have been worse if parents in that spot still try to raise their kids though. Plenty of homes are dumpster fires, and unfortunately, it's not seen as appropriate to talk about it openly. Story 11. My grandma was in a car accident and broke her ankle, so she stayed at my house and my mom/we took care of her while she recovered. I was entering puberty at the time and discovered that you could order on cable and was like a madman ordering them. The bill that month came out to $500. My mom thought it was my grandma because her novels were on like channels 50 to 60 and the adult movies were 500 to 600. I've literally never told anyone to this day. Edit. I am Latina, and this type of content for women is still pretty taboo in my culture, so that's why I'm so scared to tell anyone. Even though my mom and I are pretty open with each other, I'm still embarrassed. However, my grandma passed away in 2019, and I felt compelled to tell my secret. But my mom sees that story as a funny memory she has of my grandma that she likes to look back on and laugh about. So I don't know if I should. Story 12. In high school, I was a super good kid. Straight A student who loved homework, keeping out of trouble, and who was quiet as hell during class. Anyway, there was this guy who was also in AP classes with me, but he was super loud and obnoxious and would pull stunts in such a way that he would have some margin of plausible deniability. Though we never spoke, I'm not sure he even knew I existed. He rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was from the one cold day when this other girl in our class had her poking through her shirt because she forgot a sweater, and he kept saying to her that it was cold. Maybe it was from when he would pretend to be friends with the kid who was definitely spectrum, desperate to be friends with him to do the bully's homework for him and then bully him the next day. Sometimes once a week or a month or once every couple of months, I would whistle. It's this high-pitched whistle that sounds like a tea kettle that I can do while barely moving my mouth. Back then, no one knew I could do it except my family. The super obnoxious kid always got in trouble. I was never once suspected. Story 13. I'm the spitting image of my grandpa on my dad's side. Both my parents are almost a foot shorter than me, and I'm almost the same height as him. When my mother got sick when I was a kid, my grandpa went to visit her daily for extended periods of time in the hospital. In his final months, she did the same. After he passed away, we found out he kept a whole other family on the side in secret, too. Looking back at my dad's military deployment history, it would also be dicey if she could have gotten pregnant by him around the appropriate time. Based on a collection of various hunches, I'm fairly convinced I'm the product of an affair between my mother and my supposed grandfather. More disturbingly, this would probably be one of the most lighthearted revelations about my family. Just a note, this isn't necessarily how genetics work. Parents inherit two genes. One becomes dominant and one recessive. They may not always pass along the gene that's dominant for them. That's why things can skip a generation. For example, anyone's brother may look like the spitting image of someone within the family and not be his kid at all.
Please leave your story down below in the comments. I would absolutely love to make a video about them in the future. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.